Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Glenorchy City Council on Monday, the 30th of January 2023. I'm Beth Thomas, Mayor of Glenorchy and Chairperson of this afternoon's meeting. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. Glenorchy City Council acknowledges the Palawa people as the traditional owners and continuing custodians, current inhabitants and custodians of this land. We recognise and cherish the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice and what it can teach us about history, culture, the environment and the arts. We acknowledge and respect the contemporary Aboriginal people who continue and must be supported to maintain their Indigenous rights, identity and their ancient and irreplaceable culture. Joining me here in Council Chambers this afternoon is Deputy Mayor Sue Hickey, Alderman Jan Dunsby, Alderman Harry Quick, Alderman Molly Kendall, Alderman Russell Yaxley, Alderman Josh Cockshat, Alderman Stuart Slade and Alderman Stephen King, as well as Council's General Manager Tony McMullen, and we have our Director of Infrastructure and Works and Director of Corporate Services, as well as a number of Council staff and members of the public joining us in Chambers this afternoon. Welcome to members of the public who are joining us via our live stream as well. Before we open our agenda, I take this opportunity to make a statement about workplace health and safety. Glenorchy City Council takes workplace health and safety seriously, and this includes physical and psychological safety. We have a duty to ensure a safe workplace is provided for our employees, elected members, contractors, volunteers and members of the public who may be present at Council's workplaces. Council meetings form part of Council's workplace, and it's expected that everyone who attends Council meetings will behave in a polite and respectful manner. Council has endorsed a statement of intent setting out how we as Aldermen have agreed to conduct ourselves in representing the people of Glenorchy. In accordance with this, any disagreement should be expressed respectfully, remembering both during debate and in discussion and in decision making that we are elected to represent and serve the people of Glenorchy and make our city the best it can be. We have 20 items on our agenda this afternoon, and agenda item 1 is apologies, and we have no apologies this afternoon. Agenda item 2 is confirmation of minutes of the open meeting. I have someone move a motion that the minutes of the council meeting held on 19th of December 2022 be confirmed.
So moved.
Moved Alderman Slade, someone to second. Alderman Cockshat. Any discussion, Alderman Slade?
No, enough to add, Mayor.
Any discussion? No, I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. That's carried unanimously. Item 3 is announcements by the chair, and I don't have any this afternoon. Item 4 is pecuniary interest notification. Do any aldermen or staff have any pecuniary interests on any items on tonight's agenda? None. Item 5 is response to previous public questions taken on notice. We had a question from Mr. Eddie Steenbergen of Rosetta. Is live streaming and recording a full policy of council, at least for this current term? And the answer, Mr. Steenbergen, is that council does have a policy for audio recording of council meetings, and we are reviewing the policy with the aim of incorporating live streaming. So thank you for that question. Agenda item 6 is public question time. We have 15 minutes for public question time. And the rules are pretty straightforward. I just note that the council meeting is a formal meeting of the aldermen elected by the Glenorchy community, chaired by myself. Public question time is an opportunity in this formal meeting for the public to ask questions of your elected council representatives about the matters that affect ratepayers and citizens. Question time is for asking questions, not making statements, although brief explanations of the background to questions may be given for context. But comments or statements about council's activities are otherwise not permitted. I may permit follow-up questions at my discretion, but answers to questions are not to be debated with council. The chair, myself, I may refuse to answer a question or may direct someone to stop speaking if I decide that the question is not appropriate or in accordance with those rules. I do have the discretion to extend public question time if necessary. So we had a question on notice, thank you, from Mr. Maurice Malone from West Moona in relation to stage 2 of the Future of Local Government review, where he says it indicates that boundary consolidation, in brackets amalgamation, is option 1 being contemplated for council reform. Does this council have a public position on amalgamation? And the answer is set out in the agenda there. He asked 3 questions, in fact, about council's position on amalgamation. The answer is set out in the agenda, but in a nutshell, council has not yet resolved a position on the recommendations put forward, or the options put forward by the local government board, we will be considering a position at our next meeting on the 27th of February. We have another question on notice from Ms. Janice Bryan from Montrose in relation to a fire in a garage in Tolosa Street and records and artefacts held by the Glenorchy Historical Society. And at the time of producing the agenda, we'd received that question late, so we have an answer now. So the questions read, 2 weeks ago there was a fire in a garage in Tolosa Street. Are our publicly owned historical records and artefacts held by the Glenorchy Historical Society still stored in a garage? And the answer is, the records and items held by the Glenorchy Historical Society are not owned by council. Council therefore has no say or control over their security or storage. Question 2, does council still have a heritage officer, and has the council secured our priceless and irreplaceable historical records and items to safely protect them from loss, damage and deterioration? The answer is yes. Council employs a heritage officer 3 days per week in our planning services section. Council's heritage collection is subject to periodic inspection and assessment by an independent conservator. The purpose of this is to ensure the items in the collection are appropriately and securely stored, to record movements of items in the collections database, and to make recommendations wherever appropriate to address, for example, any condition issues requiring attention. The most recent inspection of the collection was carried out in 2022. Question 3, what is council's intention in relation to curating, preserving and creating a permanent and safe home for them? Would council consider creating a quality history room to ensure the ongoing preservation and knowledge sharing of the proud and important history of Glenorchy? The answer, council's heritage collection is currently in safe and secure storage. Selected items, typically artworks and honour boards, are on display in council-owned buildings, mostly in chambers. Curatorial requirements of the collections are assessed in the periodic inspections undertaken by a qualified conservator. The most recent such inspection was carried out in 2022. Council acknowledges the importance of Glenorchy's history and the community's interest in it. Council currently does not have an approved budget for human resources nor property suitable for the creation, upkeep, servicing or staffing of a dedicated local history room. Thank you, Ms. Bryan, for those questions. We also received a couple of late questions on notice. One this afternoon from Mr. Shane Alderton of Austin's Ferry. He asks, as a result of ongoing antisocial behaviour occurring in our community around the council chambers and surrounding areas, council has made the decision to employ security guards in these areas. Can council please explain why it has chosen to fund the cost of security guards when this matter is really a community issue and not a ratepayer or council issue? The answer, Mr. Alderton, is council has engaged security officers in and around the council forecourt and surrounding areas as an interim measure. Council officers with the security officers work with Tasmania Police to discourage antisocial behaviour so that the CBD is a place for everyone to enjoy and where our most vulnerable are safe and feel connected. Tasmania Police has been supportive of the introduction of security officers and continue to work with council to maximise the outcomes of this intervention. Glenorchy Police has increased the number of daily patrols through the CBD area and has made concerted efforts to make arrests where necessary. Council recognised the role for the community and established the CBD Roundtable in late 2020 to bring together agencies, schools, local businesses and other stakeholders affected by this behaviour to discuss and propose ways it could be addressed. A community action plan was developed and is being implemented from this work. Further, council has recently funded the PCYC in a pilot in Glenorchy to help address the service gaps in local service delivery and to work toward longer-term solutions. The service will prioritise youth and community engagement, improve youth participation in schools and secondary or sporting activities, increase community access to existing social infrastructure, improve local vocational pathways, and reduction in antisocial behaviour. Question 2, if council feels it is obligated to provide some presence in these areas, why has it chosen to fund the cost of security guards who have no power to act on any antisocial behaviour and are just as vulnerable as the rest of our community when faced with this behaviour? Has council considered funding the cost of a police presence as a much better alternative? The answer is, an important role of the security officers is to provide safety as a first responder in instances where the threat of harm or injury to the community is present. Council has worked closely with Tas Police in coordinating the security officer response with the role of Tas Police. Over the period from November 2021 to the present, the security officers trial has been effective in returning a level of confidence to our community that the council forecourt area, Glenorchy CBD, is a place for all to enjoy safely by reducing poor behaviours such as daytime violence, public urination, vandalism, littering, alcohol consumption, the use of profane language and various other types of antisocial behaviour in the immediate council forecourt area, de-escalating behaviours deemed unsafe, quickly reporting any incidents to Tas Police that might previously not have been acted on or noted, and wearing body-worn cameras with the capacity to provide evidence to Tas Police where requested. Question 3, is council aware other organisations have funded the cost of a police presence and this has provided a successful outcome to many types of situation? The answer, council's approach has included working directly with community and local businesses. Council is aware that Metro Tas has engaged Tasmanian Police to assist with antisocial behaviour. You would need to pose your question directly with Metro to ascertain the result of this approach. Question 4 relates to the future of the Glenorchy Football Club, as reported in media circles. As council has a strong relationship with the Glenorchy Football Club, both on a personal and commercial level, is council monitoring this developing situation and will you be providing any support to the club if required? The answer, council is aware that the Glenorchy District Football Club is going through a difficult time. Council is monitoring and working with the club to assist them wherever possible. In our discussions, the Glenorchy Football Club has indicated their post-COVID recovery has been slower than expected and the club president has kept council informed of their recovery strategies. The Glenorchy Football Club has an AGM later this week where a new president and board will be elected. Council will be re-engaging with the new team to keep discussing options that will assist in their recovery process. Thank you, Mr. Alderton, for those questions. And Ms. Bryan, they will be tabled in the council minutes from this meeting. Finally, and I will extend public question time because I know there are members of the public waiting, but these are important questions, I feel it's important to read the answers. So finally, a question on notice from Karen Tantari on behalf of the Australian Services Union received on the 27th of January, representing workers at Glenorchy City Council. And the question has quite a lot of loaded context before it, which will be included in the minutes, and as I say, is quite loaded, so I will not read the context. However, I'll read the question. Will council be more careful in initiating service reviews on the misguided whims that councils are purely roads, rates and rubbish into the future? The answer is to characterise the community development review as a misguided whim is both incorrect and unhelpful. The carrying out of service reviews from time to time is an important part of council's responsibilities to ensure that the services it provides meet community needs and are within the community's capacity to pay. Under the Local Government Act 1993, Section 28(2), Aldermen's responsibilities collectively include, in summary, deciding and monitoring programs for the efficient and effective provision of services, deciding and reviewing the council's resource allocation and expenditure activities, and monitoring the way that services are provided by the council. Excuse me. The council is not just a roads, rates and rubbish council. We provide a broad range of some 50 services to our community, including services such as community development, childcare, events and community engagement. This reflects an ongoing intent by council to resource those services for the benefit of the community. In relation to the Community Development Review, there is an officer report on today's agenda providing a status update. This is an operational matter. However, the report advises that agreed actions currently being implemented are a restructure of the Community Development team to refocus on 4 priority outcomes: development of a draft reconciliation action plan, development of a community development reporting dashboard providing updated actions against the agreed timeframes, and quarterly reporting to Aldermen. While it is acknowledged that change processes can be unsettling, I'm advised by the General Manager that staff were advised upfront that there was no agenda to reduce jobs as part of the review. Some employees have chosen to leave council during this process. Whether this is triggered by the review or a result of alternate job opportunities in the current buoyant job market is a matter of conjecture. However, community development positions are being advertised by council to fill those vacancies. Okay, lots of questions. this afternoon? Do members of the public present have any questions for council this afternoon? Mr. Steenbergen, would you like to come forward?
Good afternoon. I'm Eddie Steenbergen from Mary's Hope Road, Rosetta. My questions relate to a workshop that's mentioned in the agenda for today's meeting held on January 16. The council was briefed on 2 specific area plans for things that I've not seen anywhere mentioned in council documents. The first one relates to a principal activity centre specific area plan. What prompted it? What does it cover and what is it for? In brief.
Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. I might attempt to answer and then delegate to the General Manager. So you would be aware, Mr. Steenbergen, Council has endorsed probably a couple of years ago now the Greater Glenorchy plan, and some of the actions arising from that Greater Glenorchy plan were to develop specific area plans for part of our CBD. So the workshop that we had on the Principal Activity Centre really was looking at the implementation of that action under the Greater Glenorchy plan. Would that be right, General Manager?
That's correct, Mayor. So essentially, when we developed the planning scheme provisions for Glenorchy under the new statewide planning regime, there is provision for specific area plans to provide more fine-tuned planning provisions for distinct local areas. One of the things that we had developed when we originally developed the interim planning scheme was some specific planning provisions that were tailored to the Glenorchy CBD area. My understanding is that and I've been on leave, so forgive me for that, but the work in relation to this principal activity area, specific area plan, was about updating those provisions that are specific to the Glenorchy CBD, essentially learning from the experience we've had with them over the journey from the interim planning scheme to now. I'm just wondering, Mayor, whether the Director might be able to add a little bit more detail in relation to that.
No, that's pretty well captures it in a pretty detailed sense.
Thank you. To answer your question, Mr. Steenbergen?
The remainder of my question is it's the same question, but relating to the northern combination corridor, which I've not noticed anywhere else. Where is it? And the same other questions apply.
Sure.
I'll have to refer that one to the Director, I think.
Through you, Mayor, that workshop was about looking at opportunities where accommodation could be placed along the northern transit corridor, or specifically along Main Road. So there is some opportunities to put accommodation above some of the commercial retail buildings that pretty much line Main Street. At the moment, there are restrictions on the zoning and height of buildings. So this is looking at the possibility of rezoning and allowing for denser residential apartments on top of some of those commercial properties. So it was first stage workshop in council with the intention and some of the proposals that might be possible. And there's nothing specific, it's just to use them as examples of how they might work. And then would have to develop some more structured plans and would have to go through the commission to consider any sort of rezoning process. So sorry, through you, Mayor, there is going to be a process of community engagement along the way as well. So you will hear something soon.
Fantastic. My next question, which is when will the public learn something about this? Well, you weren't very specific there. When it is this? We're talking about this year, the next 2 years, term of council. What are we talking about?
Here, we'd be talking this calendar year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Steenbergen. Any further questions from members of the public this afternoon? None. We will move on then to item 7, petitions or organisations addressing a council meeting. Are there any?
There are none.
None. We Moving on then to item 8, activities of the Mayor. I have a recommendation that Council receive the report about the activities of Mayor Thomas during the period Monday 12th December to Sunday 22nd of January. Do I have someone to move this as a motion? Moved Alderman King, someone to second, Alderman Slade. Any discussion? Alderman Flynn.
Oh, I think you've been busy as usual, Mayor. I appreciate you supplying us with all this information. I don't feel you need to, but again, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman King. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
I disagree, Mayor. The attendance at the Jack Jumpers games that are listed there, in what capacity is that? Is that representing council?
Yes, yeah, the Jack Jumpers do invite me to the games as the local mayor of the home venue, so I'm very grateful to be able to attend.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Nope. And I'll go back to move Alderman King.
Only slightly jealous, Mayor, but other than that, no.
Okay, I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. It's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 9, review of council services update, and we have a recommendation that council note the report of the review of council services, including actions completed to date and next steps, concluding the review of the community development, and 2, adopt the community development action plan summary 22-23. Do I have someone to move this as a motion? Moved Alderman King, someone to second. Alderman Kendall, Alderman King.
Thanks, Mayor. I think thank the General Manager and staff for this report. It appears to cover everything that we've been through and about to go through, so it's pretty clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman King. Any further discussion? Alderman Hickey, Deputy Mayor Hickey.
Yes, I believe I might have been guilty of trying to push for this review, and I stand by it. Unlike that question that you got earlier tonight, it is absolutely critical that an organisation of this size and function reviews its activities on a regular basis. It's critical that we are spending ratepayers' money in targeted areas where they're most needed, and over the decades things will change. Some sections could be better handled by the private sector, others are better in-house, but regardless, it's in the interest of staff that we keep this a very flexible and dynamic organisation with resources going to the areas that are most in need. I was interested in the risk management that it rated high as a backlash from the community, but I just failed to, I see how it's mitigated, but seriously, I would be very surprised if the community did not expect us to review the amount of money we're spending in certain areas regularly to see if that's the best use of money, their money, from time to time. So I'm very happy with the report and thank the officers for the work they've done to date and look forward to future work as we review these core functions of council.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Yaxley.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through you, I think communities are at the heart of a lot of what we do, and communities close to that. So, the fact that there is a review, I think that's a positive and a proactive thing. I think speaking from what Deputy Mayor has said, that reviewing is not necessarily a negative. It is a positive thing, I believe. It's being proactive with the ratepayers' money and things. So I guess community needs are flexible, and so we need to be flexible and adaptable with that as well. So I'd say we just need to make sure that we communicate these challenges and these changes internally and externally really well, and let's see a positive push forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Any further discussion? Alderman Kendall.
Yeah, in support of what's already been said, and wondering if there's any way we can reduce that level of speculation that is inevitable, and it sounds like it's come through in that letter, or if there's any learnings that we can take away from this review process for next time.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I guess it's to the
Question
General
for the General
Manager
Manager.
through you now.
Through you, Mayor. Look, I think to recap our review of council services process, we had a first section, if you like, that rejigged our organisational structure to 2 directorates in trial, and also we saw a redundancy program prior to the end of June. The And we then proceeded through to a review of our childcare service that was dealt with in around about September from memory. And around about sort of, might have been August, around about sort of August onwards, we were then looking at our community development and arts and culture areas. And really, they had a different focus to the earlier reviews. The focus was really on fine-tuning and making sure that what we were doing in terms of our service to the community met community expectations. So with the community development review, it was really about just making sure that we were really focused on community priorities, and that was something that we had come through very strongly from the alderman, in the past council, that there was a need to focus on those community priorities. So we believe we've achieved that as part of this process, and we now have a revised action plan. We're restructuring our positions to more strongly align with those community priorities. So we believe we're in a good position going forward. As was alluded to though in the ASU's question, clearly any change, organisational change, can cause stress and strains. I guess whilst we've tried to work through that, and we've provided assurances that there were no job losses intended as part of this process, nevertheless, people do worry, and we have, it has had an impact on morale as we've gone through the process. We're now, with this process update, we've now, through that process, we're now working to embed the structure to work through putting people into new positions and moving forward from there.
Thank you, General Manager. Anything further on the agenda? Any further discussion? I'd like to speak to, I'd like to take the opportunity to speak to this item and welcome the conclusion of the review, noting that it has had an impact. I think here at Council we need to be creating a culture of continual review and continual improvement, and that will somewhat mitigate, impacts of reviews that seem to come up like this and somewhat scare or shock staff. The needs of our community are continually changing. We have demographic changes and things going on in our community all the time, and we need to be able to be responsive to what those needs are and fill service gaps and work with other providers to meet those service gaps where they exist. We also have very limited resources within our community development department. It's not an area that generates revenue like some other areas of council, other than grants that we receive, and I know our community development team works really hard to generate grants for the benefit of our community, and I certainly commend that. But with the minimal resources we do have, we need to be targeted in our approach. We can't be everything to everyone, so we need to be clear about what's in our scope and what's outside of our scope, and we need to be clear with our community, and particularly community organisations that we work with, about what our role is and what it isn't, so that we're managing expectations appropriately. That also extends to us as aldermen having a good understanding of what the role of our community team is and what it isn't, and the value and benefit that provides to the community, because we as aldermen appreciate and value the work that our community development team does, and we want to be able to celebrate and promote that when we're talking to people out in the community. So I welcome the more pointed, targeted action plan that we have here to adopt this afternoon. I note there are some of the actions in there are about supporting particular initiatives and celebrating and promoting and holding a forum on things. So I look forward to seeing in the reporting we get back what the concrete actions are there and what the outcomes are, because that's what we want to be able to promote. Some of the feedback from the community has been that, what does support actually mean? What does that look like? So that's what I look forward to receiving more information on as we get the quarterly reports on this action plan. So I hope that, although it may have caused a bit of turbulence, I hope that this does provide the community development team with a bit more certainty and clarity going forward, and hopefully can be the basis for improving that connection between the community area and Alderman and that feedback loop to the community. So I welcome it, and I look forward to continuing to hear about the progress as we go through the implementation of the plan. I just did have a question about how will we communicate, given there is interest in our community about the role of our community development team, how will we communicate this information about what the role is and what the action plan is, how we support particular organisations within our community in particular, how will we communicate that to those organisations that this is the role, this is in the scope, this is what we're focused on. Have we had any thought about how we communicate that, General Manager?
Now, at this stage, we've simply been working through the review itself, so no, I'd say no, we haven't at this point. I'm not sure whether the Director or Manager has anything further to add in relation to that, but it's certainly something we can look to do. I think it can potentially be a targeted mail out of the action plan and an explanation, a covering letter that explains how we've restructured in that area to greater focus on those priorities
Yeah, thank you. Marina Campbell, Manager of Community.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just to add to that, yes, we have been focusing on finalising the action plan, but we've also been working in that space of the action plan, so already communicating with our stakeholders. But we will be developing a poster and a sort of like a tile that outlines the 9 actions, and we will provide communication through to our key stakeholders on what focus we have in front of us. And also in recruiting our new positions, that will provide us with an opportunity to have increased energy in that space to be communicating with our stakeholders.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you to you and to Jill. I know Jill's here as well for your efforts, particularly in recent times where I know you have had staff shortages. We really do acknowledge and appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think if I could just finally say we're working on the recommendations of the review, and that included a number of areas of communication and how we can sort of sharpen our focus on communication. So we've developed a action plan to the side, which provides us with some actions, and that includes developing a communication plan. So the steps are being put in place, and you will see more of that coming out shortly.
Excellent. Look forward to it. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I'll go back to the member, Alderman King, to close debate.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank my fellow aldermen for their input, and I feel this is a well articulated report, and reviews are important. To fail to plan is to plan to fail, and that's part of what this is all about, planning for the future, looking where we're at and where we can get to and how we get there. And I appreciate Alderman Yaxley's comments there around communication. I think although we've got this and it's communicated to us, maybe we need to look how the community are better informed as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I guess that's always something we can do better. That's not a criticism, but if the community were more aware, then maybe we wouldn't get the questions that we've got, maybe. But nevertheless, yeah, thank you again to the staff for the report, and keep moving.
Thank you, Alderman King. I will put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you are for. That's carried unanimously. Moving on to item 10, review of the Statement of Commitment on Housing. We have a recommendation that Council adopts the revised Statement of Commitment on Housing in attachment 4. I have someone to move this as a motion. Move to Alderman King. Thank you. Someone to second. Alderman Quick. Alderman King.
Thank you, Mayor. It's our commitment to housing and how we can better assist the community through planning, through opening up land, council land it might have, everything we can do to assist. But of course, it's only the ground floor. It really is the ground floor. It comes down to not just the government, but private enterprise being able to get in and get something done here. I still don't believe we've got enough tradespeople to get the houses done that want to be done, but that's another story altogether. So I applaud our staff for their for this report. We'll keep trying to make things available, make land available for the community to build on.
Thank you, Alderman King. Any further discussion? Alderman Quick.
I mean, this is a very complex issue. I mean, no one council, no one tier of government can solve this. it's not only a nationwide issue here, it's right around the world. How do we provide a wide range of housing options for first homeowners to people in social housing to changing planning so we can have multiple dwellings in areas. So I just think that we're part of a great sort of cog, a machine that we need to work with local government, state government, federal government and developers. And it's interesting, in the last meeting of the GPA, there were developments where developers are going to provide more housing options in Glenorchy, which I think is a fantastic issue. So I think there's a realisation by federal and state governments that we need partnerships, and that's the only way to solve the issue.
Thank you, Alderman Quick. Any further discussion? Alderman Cockshott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo everyone's thoughts about this, but I think in the GPA we've seen people want to do development in Glenorchy, which is great. It's good to see there's recent subdivisions coming our way, so it's a big issue, like you've said. If we can all work together with key stakeholders to get the ball moving, it'll be great. And obviously we've made a start this last GPA, so onwards and upwards, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Cockshott. Any further discussion? I speak in support of the revised statement of commitment on housing. We have had this statement of commitment on housing for some time now. I think it was 2020 we first endorsed it. This review is really about tightening it, about making it providing clarity about, again, what council's role is and what it isn't, as clearly as possible to the community and to service providers and to developers and to government, being really clear about what our role is. Again, we can't be all things to all people within the resources we have, so it's really important that we focus on the areas that we can make the biggest difference. And as my fellow aldermen have alluded to, those areas are predominantly in trying to identify land that's surplus to council or community needs, public owned land for potential disposal for housing purposes, and rezoning land for residential housing purposes, working with the government and service providers towards that aim. As a landowner, as a planning authority, as a local government, advocating to state and federal government as well. And of course, from a human services perspective, working with local service providers to connect people to those supports on the ground when they are experiencing homelessness or housing affordability issues. So it's about being clear about what our role is there. So I'm happy to support the revised statement, and I thank again the manager of community and the working group internally for bringing this to us. There's no further discussion. I'll go back to mover Alderman King.
Yes. No, thank you, Mayor. I think we've covered everything.
I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Item 11, Code of Conduct Panel Determination. We have a recommendation that Council 1 note the tabling of the Code of Conduct Panel's determination report in relation to a complaint made by Mr. Bo Thompson against Alderman Sims. And 2, note the suspension period for Alderman Sims from performing and exercising the functions and powers of office as an alderman commenced 23rd January 2023 for a period of 3 months, concluding at midnight 23rd of April 2023. Do I have someone to move this as a motion?
No.
Moved Alderman Dunsby. Someone to second? Alderman King. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you, Mayor. I note that procedurally this item needs to be on our agenda under the Local Government Act, noting the contents there and the comprehensive report. No further comment from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? Alderman
I
Quick.
have a question. I note that the alderman in question has a Facebook page with Glenorchy City Council on. Is she required under the determination to remove that from Facebook and just have her own Facebook page, but no mention of GC, Glenorchy City Council?
Thank you for the question, Alderman Quick. My understanding is that would be a matter for the Director of Local Government, but I might just ask the General Manager to confirm that.
Through you, Mayor, it's not a specific requirement of the determination that's been made by the Code of Conduct panel, so it's then a matter for the directors judgment as to what are the appropriate steps to take.
But if she purports to still be a member of the, an alderman on the Glenorchy City Council, is that not contrary to the effect that she's been suspended for 3 months?
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Quick. Director of Corporate Services, Jenny Richardson, has been acting GM, so I might defer to her as she dealt with the matter last week.
So, thank you, Mayor, and apologies, Tony. The Director of Local Government sent me an email and advised what that period of suspension meant, and part of that is no longer representing yourself as a councillor, including using the title councillor in any correspondence or on social media, or representing the views of council in the capacity of a councillor. So the director would, if they believe there was something to review, they would review that based on outlining what that suspension actually includes.
Thank you, Director Richardson. Any further discussion? I'd like to move it, Alderman Dunsby.
Nothing further, thank you, Mayor.
I will put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you are for. Carried unanimously. Item 12, expectations of behaviour. We have a recommendation that council note the letter received from the Director of Local Government. Do I have someone to move? Deputy Mayor Hickey, someone to second. Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor.
I think it's self-explanatory for anyone who has read the agenda. Basically, it's expecting aldermen and councillors to behave as professionally as we can, and it's a direction from the Director of Local Government.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? General
Mayor, I
Manager.
just might add that this isn't specific to Glenorchy City Council. This is something that's gone around the entire local government sector for Tasmania.
Thank you, General Manager. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do remind ourselves of what our responsibilities are in this particular area. We've seen this council go through many troubled years. We've got ourselves to a fairly good place again. We don't want to go back into those troubled times. So, it does us all good to be reminded of what we do need to do and not do as appropriate under the Act. And I appreciate the effort of the Director writing to us. That's not something that normally happens, but I think it's a very timely reminder.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? I echo those sentiments of Alderman Dunsby. I think this Director has taken the opportunity early on in the council term for councils across the state to set out quite clearly expectations and behaviour that won't be tolerated early on. This, as the General Manager has pointed out, this is not a letter that was sent directly at or as a result of behaviour, particularly at our council. It's a letter that's been sent to all mayors and asked to be forwarded on to all aldermen and councillors and to be tabled. The Director of Local Government specifically asked that the letter be tabled at each council's next ordinary council meeting. So that's the reason we're tabling it this afternoon. We have worked hard as a new council over our short time so far to create a really positive culture. And we created our statement of intent, which I referred to earlier on our very first workshop together, our first full day induction session, and I'm really pleased with how we've been interacting with each other so far. I think we are showing how it can be done. So I'm grateful for that and look forward to continuing to work with my fellow aldermen towards that aim. Again, I applaud the Director for taking this stand early because we all deserve to work in a safe and respectful workplace. Any further discussion? We'll go back to Deputy Mayor Hickey to close debate.
No, I think we've covered that. Thank you.
I will put it to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Item 13, Glenorchy Jobs Hub Strategic Plan, Steering Committee Terms of Reference and Work Plan. We have a recommendation that Council approve the Glenorchy Jobs Hub Steering Committee Terms of Reference, approve the Glenorchy Jobs Hub Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025, and approve the Glenorchy Jobs Hub Work Plan 2022 to 2025. Have someone to move this as a motion. Alderman Dunsby, seconded Alderman Deputy Mayor Hickey. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you, Mayor. I really enjoyed the presentation we had at our workshop to give us a full understanding of where we sit with this area and the plans ahead as well. So I really enjoyed having that information. The staff impart that to us. I think that made us better informed for it and a better understanding around this report. So I'm happy now to throw it open for discussion.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? Alderman Deputy Mayor Hickey.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is one of those items that we have put through a review process. I was reasonably vocal that I also thought this was another level of government cost shifting, because employment really belongs with the federal government, state government, but on a broader look, it is everybody's responsibility where we possibly can to connect people to jobs. Having been briefed by the particular officers who work there, I found them to be extremely passionate officers dedicated to connecting people to jobs, and I thank them for that. It is a difficult one to sort of put a number on and qualify the actual outcomes and benefits to the community, except that every person we get into a job is going to benefit their family and our community. The unfortunate thing is there are so many people in job layering to provide jobs that sometimes we're competing with other job providers, or this jobs hub is competing with other job providers, and people can be counted as being placed in a job that might have been put through another not-for-profit, and so it's sort of like a double tick for the one person getting a job. Also, the job might be counted as a job when in actual fact it's 1 or 2 days opening boxes at Spotlight. So it's very hard to put measures around it, but as I've said, I have every confidence that we have a better layer of governance around it. We also have a better, stronger relationship with the state government who are funding it completely. And also that we really, really need every person that's able-bodied and capable to be working. It is a funny thing that we still have people unemployed at a time when there's so many skill shortages. And so this is a much bigger picture where we have to sort of lead onto the state government and federal governments and say, well, you know, where is it broken? Why are people not getting the education? Why are they not being steered earlier into the skills? Be that rather than babysitting them, if they don't want to be at school in years 11 and 12, funnel them through an apprenticeship. There's got to be lots of things that really need to be looked at a whole of community level, and particularly higher levels of government, rather than sort of dropping it right down to local government. We do have a lot of things on our plate, and we also have this to oversee as well. But the core mission aligns with my values, and I think that of the community, and that is to get people into jobs and create a more vibrant community where we possibly can. So that enriches the community and also raises our standard of living and the productivity of this region. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Quick.
Excuse me, I'd like to endorse the Deputy Mayor's comments. I mean, it's a very complex issue. We're the only council in Tasmania that operates a jobs hub, and I think it's incumbent upon us to work collaboratively with the jobs hub people. And like others here, I was really impressed with the presentation we had the other week. And I'd like to invite, you know, councillors and the general public to go in and see exactly what they're doing and how difficult it is, and hear about the success stories that emanate from the work they're doing.
Thank you, Alderman Quick. Alderman Yaxley.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, just in terms of the, you know, from what I've understood from that presentation, which I agree was very good. You know, from what they've sort of said, that they really are trying to complement with the other providers, and obviously a very important job in terms of connecting local people to local jobs. So from what I read, the strategic plan and the work plan are very solid and certainly achievable. So looking forward to seeing the results.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Any further discussion? I'd like to commend the strategic plan and the terms of reference for the steering committee, and the strategic plan and the work plan to council for endorsement. We have spent quite a bit of time developing this as a steering committee, and I really am grateful for the efforts of council staff, particularly Tracy and her team here at council in supporting the steering committee to prepare the plan, and also in grateful for the steering committee membership. We've had a couple of steering committee members who have been on the steering committee from day one, back when the Jobs Hub was first established, or close to that time, and they represent local employers, one Sam Meyer from Downer and one Liz Rod from Mona, and their commitment and dedication to the steering committee and to the outcomes of the Jobs Hub overall for our community really are second to none. We also have Rod from Work and Training, and we've recently had the principal of Glenorchy College, Shane Oldfield, join the steering committee, as well as Cassie from Steps has been represented. So it's been a really great exercise to go through to review to develop the strategic plan and the work plan going forward, knowing that we're in a period of sort of review, and our current sort of contract with Steps is until August this year. So it will be a period of sort of continual review for the steering committee, and we'll be coming back to council with recommendations on where to from here going forward to make sure that the Jobs Hub is structured and implemented to get the best possible results for the community. So you would have seen in the strategic plan quite a bit of it for this work for the steering committee is focused on planning for the future, and Jobs Tasmania have been fantastic and have committed to supporting us through that to help us going forward with that agenda. So it is a collaborative effort, state government and local government, and we have made the jobs hubs, the regional jobs hubs as a collective, the 7 regional jobs hubs across Tasmania as a collective made a submission to the federal government's white paper review into the jobs system. So acknowledging some of the issues that the Deputy Mayor raises, Jobs Tasmania are very aware of that and looking at how we can make sure the jobs hub complement rather than compete with other services is really important. It is quite a complex system, the job provider system, but as we know, people still do fall through the gaps, and really that's the aim of the Jobs Hub, is to provide for those people who aren't necessarily eligible for those other job provider services. And we heard some of those stories when the Jobs Hub's manager and one of the jobs coaches came to present to us. So really appreciated their time. So as I say, commend these documents to Alderman and look forward to coming back to you for your thoughts on where to from here as we go through the next stages of the Jobs Hub to make sure we get it right.
Mayor, just one final opportunity to speak, if I may. One of the most concerning things we heard was that a lot of the people struggling to get jobs for the first time in their life were having to offer a resume. And with low-level literacy skills and various reasons why they've slipped through the cracks, it's really a sad indictment on our education system and some of the social services that have led these people to this point in time to try and get a job. So the very fact that we've got some people there, as you said, as a safety net, willing and able and very passionate about helping these people to get into employment is something we should be proud of, even if it may not be our core responsibility. I'm here for the bigger picture to say, well, let's go with this because it's helpful.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. No further discussion. I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Dunphy.
Nothing further, thank you.
I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Moving on to item 14, local government elections review process. You're going to move the recommendation. Council make a submission to the Tasmanian Office of Local Government regarding the recently introduced Local Government Amended Elections Act. Moved Alderman Hickey, someone to second. Alderman King. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. This is another example of why processes must be reviewed regularly. In my knowledge in local government for the past 10 years, the local government has been advocating for a polling day dedicated rather than this long-winded, painful process where the whole council goes on hold, as in the aldermanic councillor level goes on hold in a caretaker mode, can't actually attend meetings, can't approve things. You know, it's a ludicrous situation where we're sort of off the air for, is it 6 weeks? 6 weeks, something like that. So bring it on to a shorter electoral time, and also the polling. It's just so much easier rather than tie up the resources of the local council and the many staff that we had involved in trying to sort it out. Also, I am always been an advocate, and I think this has been in the review pipeline for as long as I can remember as well, and that is to transfer the General Manager's role to the Tasmanian Electoral Commission for Management. I say that because I think it is critical to have a General Manager's role. It is, or call it something else. A person can live in Hobart, for example, but operate business or run a property out here in Glenorchy and should have a say in how the city is proceeding. However, I've also witnessed extreme abuse of a General Manager's role, and I remember one review at Hobart City Council where a few of the aldermen went out to actually personally check some of the people who were on the General Manager's role, revealed that there were 10 people living in a very large house in Newtown that was completely padlocked and with cobwebs on the padlocks. So nobody was living in that house. There were also 10 people identified as living in a post box in Glenorchy. So, you know, there is an opportunity for fraud there, as there is in lots of systems. And so I really would like this to be taken to a much higher level to the Tasmanian Electoral Commission and not have so much pressure put on the managerial staff and the General Manager of this council. And the other one is that I know, Mayor, you've been advocating for, is to actually have an alignment of the voting count against the elected member vacancies, because that was kind of a ludicrous scenario. But overall, I think this council has made some very good contributions to the submission, and I will be endorsing those as have been suggested. I think we've got more of an appetite by the state government than I've ever seen in a decade for getting council reform, and I'm hoping that Minister Street, still Minister Ford, will push this through, because I think it's time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Slade.
Mayor, I thought it was a little bit odd, this policy, in one spot, and the spot was that the policy does not apply to local government by-elections. So I was thinking about this last night, and I was just thinking, well, you could have election or elections that might involve a couple of aldermen and a mayor and a by-election, right? So in other words, what's included in what's a major decision on page 3 and all those parts there, they're not included. So if you were perhaps a clever person, or you could really have a field day, and you're doing it legally. So what I'm saying is that I don't know why that statement's there, that it doesn't apply to local government by-elections, because there's clearly, and I don't have to emphasise any more, that things could happen during a period of by-elections are much smaller periods, I understand that, but it could be a period of 4 to 5 weeks where you or whatever, anybody in talking in this room or whatever, could have a field day. And I don't know why that's like that.
Thank you, Alderman Slade. I take it you're referring to the caretaker policy, which is the attachment that we're providing,
Yes.
yep, with the submission to the government. So
Yes.
council made the decision on the recommendation of the Minister for Local Government to adopt a caretaker policy prior to the election period.
Right.
The General Manager may be able to speak to why that
Yes.
specifically was included, but I will say that any caretaker policy that is mandated by the government as a result of this review will, I expect, come to councils for consultation and feedback.
I totally support the policy.
Yeah.
I just thought that was a major
Yeah.
anomaly.
Yeah, so there will be opportunity for us as a council to review it prior to the next election, and I guess if there was to be a by-election, General Manager, but do you just want to speak to that particular?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I can't recall the specific point, and I know that the Director and Manager are here that were also involved. But if I had to hazard a guess, I would say that it's about the scale of change that's involved. So with obviously with a council election, the entire shooting match is dissolved. And so there's a fairly large potential for the council to want to make sure that it's maximising its chances of re-election if people want to proceed. So it's better to show the community from a safeguard point of view that we are holding ourselves to this caretaker policy. With a by-election, I think while there's potential for that sort of thing to happen, we're talking about generally a single person situation, and so it's that balancing act between continuity. You've still got, in the case of our council, you've still got nine sitting members around the table making a decision. So the potential, I think, for for poor decision making is much lower than if you had a situation where the entire council was up for grabs in terms of position. So I think it's basically a risk management assessment, saying that there's a greater potential risk around a whole council election as opposed to a by-election, which is generally going to be for a single candidate. I'm not sure, Mayor, whether the director or the manager had any further observations.
Through you, Mayor, no, I thought that summed it up exactly with our discussions. We felt there was 9 aldermen and that was enough for a decision-making body.
Certainly.
Well, if I'm just reading this, Mayor, and irrespective of decisions made in this room, if you're a person who's standing in a by-election, you don't have to adhere to any of those. I'm just saying, I think any caretaker period policy should be all embracing for all circumstances. So I support this. I think it should also include a local governance ordinance.
Sure, yeah. And as I say, we're putting our caretaker policy forward as part of the submission to the government about the Amended Elections Act. And I'm sure other councils who adopted caretaker policies will do the same. And hopefully what the government will do as a result will be to develop a policy that can be applied consistently across councils. And in doing that, I would hope they would come to us with feedback.
Through you, Mayor, I suspect that the government's mood is to legislate this. So I think this was an interim step in suggesting councils adopt these policies, and many in the state adopted them for the first time. I suspect that this will become part of the legislation, and it'll be resolved by that means. The alternative, of course, is that as a council policy, there is the opportunity for council to review. At this stage, it's listed for routine review at a point in time. But if council is of a mind to expedite that review and look at that particular point that Alderman Slade is raising, there's the opportunity there to do so around the table.
Or to create a specific policy applicable to by-elections. Yes.
I
have a question.
Yes, it is a question, so please bear with me as I try and frame this as a question. Given the commentary just made by Alderman Slade, which I do fully support, because if you think about it, within 2 years we could have a state election and possibly 3 or 4 people from this very council may put their hand up to stand, which could create an absolute circus. So I would be happy to just put a motion, amend the motion to say 2 or 3 simple words that say, we'll scrap the by, whatever it says there.
So we're not actually debating the context of our caretaker policy now, though. What we're putting it forward to say as part of the submission, this was the caretaker policy we adopted.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be better I understand where Alderman Slade's coming from, and I think in the interest of good governance, my personal view, and it could be kicked off the table, is just that it's no harm in adding it now. It makes common sense when you think about another election within 2 years, and some, it's quite possible that talent from this council will want to put their hand up to run in the next election.
So
and there could be multiple people. We could be talking 3 to 5. Not me, but it could be others.
So it's about recommending as part of our submission that the government consider legislating a caretaker policy for by-elections.
Yes. Are you happy with that, Alderman Slade? I
So
think that would strengthen it.
do we need that as part of the motion, General Manager, or can officers incorporate that into the report?
Through Mayor, so, I just wanted to clarify that our election caretaker period policy is about local government elections, not state elections or federal elections. So if,
There could be a lot of grandstanding.
I think what the point that is being made is that should then be a need for a by-election, that would only be if a by-election was triggered though, based on what you're saying, Alderman Slater, only if a by-election was triggered, not when people were running for election. So it wouldn't necessarily cover it because you wouldn't be triggering a by-election just by people standing because they don't have to resign to run for Parliament. So I think it's a separate issue that would need council perhaps to develop its own policy in relation to.
Or we ask the government to make a policy. Because it will be a circus.
So I guess for decades, we have seen people transition.
But just usually one at a time in a by-election.
So we'd be making assumptions.
through you, Mayor, if that were the case, it would be outside of the scope of this policy, which is about local government elections. So we don't at this stage have a policy around that issue of candidates, council candidates who might be aspiring to state government office. That this policy doesn't cover that. This, as you said before, this caretaker period policy is about local government elections, and we're simply attaching it to our submission for the information of the government, so that when they go through and look at the local government elections in 2022, they will have council's considered view about things that they could look at doing differently, and they'll also have a copy of our election caretaker period policies that they can look at.
General Manager, so hypothetically, if that by-election was the mayor, hypothetically, then it is the same problem.
But there would only be a by-election, Deputy Mayor, if it was me, if I or someone was to be elected to state government, so it would be after the fact.
Yes,
So
but the by-election would create.
Whoever would be gone. So it's.
What if several people wanted to nominate for the mayor though? Which is what I think Alderman Slade's
That's where I'm coming from.
alluding to.
So then that would be a separate policy around by-elections
That's right.
potentially.
Or a modification of the existing.
Where that none of this here would apply to them.
Yeah, so if we consider that they apply to by-elections.
Yes, which is difficult if you think about, particularly if you have someone who is acting mayor, who has to perform the role of mayor whilst also campaigning. I mean, I had that experience a couple of years ago, which was really quite challenging to manage. That you've got the responsibility of you've been elected or you've been appointed to maintain that responsibility, but at the same time you've got to
double-edged sword. It's beneficial.
Yeah,
and may be difficult.
But
Anyway.
it's the way it's been for decades, I guess. And perhaps it hasn't been addressed because it's too hard. But I do take your point, Alderman Slater, and I do think it could be that feedback could be incorporated into the next steps that the government take in legislating, which I think they will, as the General Manager has said, legislating a caretaker policy. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
Yes, thank you. It's my personal view that some of these things that were brought in too fast and a lot of thought wasn't put into them. So now we're having the opportunity to see where the difficulties were, particularly the caretaker policy. It was suggested that we all bring it in very fast, but we didn't understand potential implications, as we've heard in our discussions. So I think by having this submission and the caretaker policy attached will reinforce the issues that we certainly found. I very strongly believe that the mandate for people to only vote 4 or 5 when there were more vacancies than that on council. I strongly believe that the minimum number of vote should be the same as the vacancies on any particular council, whether it's 7, 9, 10 or 12. At least then everybody has their democratic right to vote for their 7, 9, 10 or 12. In our particular council it's 10. you know, should you have 5 very popular people, you'll find that those 5 votes, many big votes would have exhausted and would potentially change the dynamic of what the vote would be. So I think that voters need to understand they have 10 votes to put through. And this report clearly indicates that back to the local government area, which I find very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunphy. Alderman Cockshott.
Thanks, Mayor. Just 2 quick points to me. Just wanted to raise where it's got point 1, acknowledging the pleasing increase in voter turnout as a result of the introduction of compulsory voting. I think it was a good thing. I think the 2017-18 election, if I got my years right, was 55%. I think it was 82% the last election, which is a good thing because more people having their say, getting a more representative council. And the other point was, prior to the next local government election, assess the relatively benefits of polling day versus postal voting. I think everyone would probably agree that, you know, have one day, like you usually have an election, get all done, get the results in. I think with the postal voting, people had issues, they changed address, it wasn't updated with the TEC, vice versa, long wait times, the technology wasn't too crash hot. So I think the introduction of a polling day would be very beneficial, to be honest. Get on with the job, get it all counted.
Thank you, Alderman Cockshott. Any further discussion? No, I too support the submission that is recommended to us. The issues raised were ones that we have discussed through the election process, and I acknowledge the efforts of council staff, particularly Marion and Andy, through that last couple of weeks, which was extremely hectic and put extreme pressure on our staff in addition to their normal duties through that time, which I think was something that was not anticipated by us or by the Electoral Commission or by the Minister in making this change. So it's definitely something that needs to be considered, and as Alderman Cockshott has said, one of the arguments for a polling day, local government, you know, the weight of our decisions has as much gravity and impact on community at the local level as state and federal government decisions, and we ought to be no different when it comes to voting. So I welcomed the introduction of compulsory voting, and hope the government will listen to the recommendations or the submissions that I think a lot of councils will be making around the one single polling day. Also, the issues Alderman Dunsby has raised around the 1 to 5 voting. Whilst it simplifies the process, what if everyone voted for the same 1 to 5? We wouldn't have enough people around the table. Very unlikely statistically, I know, to happen, but still a possibility. So, commend this submission, and I hope the government listens, and I hope they continue to act decisively on these things as they did in this instance. There's no further discussion. I'll go back to the mover. Deputy Mayor.
I think it's been a good debate and well summed up, and I'd like to thank Alderman Slade for his contribution because it was something we hadn't thought about.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Moving on, financial performance report to 31st of December 2022. A recommendation that Council receive and note the financial performance report for the year to date ending 31st of December and approve by absolute majority the variation of the 2022-23 budget by reducing the capital estimate by 25,000, increasing expenditure estimate by 25,000 pursuant to section 82(4) of the Local Government Act. Have someone to move this as a motion. Alderman Dunsby, someone to second. Alderman Yaxley. Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that the report is fairly self-explanatory in the reasons set out. I don't think I can value add to the debate other than supports in the report. So I'd open for discussion.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any discussion? Alderman Yaxley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so again, the result, the operating result being 2.2 better off, which is a great to see, with obviously increased revenue and less in expenditure, so that's great. And just with the alteration to the budget, obviously after looking at it, it improves our technology structure to better serve our community, so it makes sense. So I think it's fine.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Any further discussion? Go back to the mover. Deputy Mayor. Oh, sorry, Alderman Dunsby. Turn the page.
Nothing further, thank you, Mayor.
Nothing further. I will put the motion to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Item 16, updated council policies. We have a recommendation that council adopt the fraud control and corruption prevention policy 2022 in attachment 2. I have someone to move this as motion. Alderman Kendall. Someone to second. Alderman Cockshott. Alderman Kendall. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this policy update is fairly non-controversial. It's just amending some typos and updating and taking out some of the background superfluous kind of wording, which I'm all for simplifying policies, so happy to move this one.
Thank you, Alderman Kendall. Any discussion? Alderman Slade.
Mayor, I differ in this one. I read the previous one and the amended one. Why that change was so the items for relation to the background and the what are we, objectives was put at the rear? Because in a policy, I've never seen that before. They normally at the front. I couldn't get it.
Sorry, through you here. Are you asking about the structure
Yeah,
of our policy document?
Yeah, why that was moved to the end.
You were talking about the actual structure, so
Yes.
why it's at the end. That's just the way that our policy documents, every policy document has the same templated structure. And that was just arranging it from the old policy template to the new policy template, which was approved 2021, I think, by council. So,
Well,
If I might add there, Alderman Slade, the background piece doesn't add to the policy itself. So
No.
the policy is the front half of the document and the background paragraph at the end just helps the reader understand the history, I guess, around why the policy is being provided in the first instance.
well, I went through the policies, and there is still ones that are the old ones.
Yes, as they get upgraded, they move to the new template.
Then I looked at policies that I've seen in companies and other things, and having a policy statement and policy objectives at the end rather at the front is not consistent. That's what I couldn't work out. I just couldn't work out. 'Cause to me, you want to know without being rude, Mayor, things like aldermen who are government structure and all those important things at the front as you're reading through. But no, they're at the end. And I found it very hard to absorb that and go backs and forwards. But if that's the format, I've got to accept it, but I'm just saying I found it a very unusual way of policy development in that way. If I could just move on in relation to this as well. There's some typos. It's best for me just to shoot the typos through to the manager. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll do that then, Mayor.
Send those to the Director of Corporate Services.
Send it through me, please.
Thank you, right. And also, there's inconsistencies. Everybody we start off with, we've now changed it, which is the new buzzword in fraud control and corruption prevention policy. That's what it's called now. I don't like it, but that's what they call that all around Australia, and I accept that. But in the document, you're still referring at different stages. You keep going, and you go back to and call it the fraud and corruption, like on page, where are we here? On page 7, Council Fraud Control and Corruption. You've got the prevention policy there, but above it, you go back and go through the other one, referring to it as a fraud and what it was previously. So can I just forward those on to Mayor? Can I, so we have consistency? I know after you amend these things, you do get caught sometimes between these things, but I thought it actually, in fact, it was another document. And I couldn't find the document. How do I get that document, Mayor? I tried to find the document.
You're talking about the fraud?
The fraud and corruption control plan. Where was that?
It's part of the, through you, Mayor, part of the fraud and corruption control framework, which includes the plan, the policy, and actually it's a much more detailed, gives examples of fraud and corruption for the staff in our operational side. So we included that under our audit panel, and it is a separate document. It should be under our policies and not policies for directives.
Okay, I went there at the weekend, Mayor, so I really want to look at and read that, but I couldn't find it.
I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, we can make sure you
Okay.
But it is a much more detailed example. It goes through all of the sampling and high-risk areas that we then periodically audit.
So you'll share that with Alderman Tracy. Thank you.
So in summary, Mayor, of course I support a fraud control and corruption prevention policy. I just wanted to raise the fact that I thought the presentation of where things are was a little bit different, and also some areas there. I don't totally still support the presentation, but I'll certainly pass on those areas to the manager.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Slade. Any further discussion? No. I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Kendall.
Yep,
Happy to put the motion? Yep. I'll put it to the vote. Please raise your hand if you're for. Carried unanimously. Moving on to item 17, notices of motion, questions on notice without notice. Do we have any questions without notice this afternoon? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. Question about notice, can a review of the timing of the announcement of the Citizen and Young Citizen of the Year plus supporting categories be implemented with an intent to return them to January? So Clyde's approach now with some rationale. In January 2023 in Glenorchy, we were missing an element, an acknowledgement of Australia Day. For many years, we've celebrated the announcement of our Citizen and Young Citizen of the Year, and more recently, some other awards. With a trial of moving these awards to May, we have created a void. Council has progressively reduced its engagement in Australia Day. At its peak, there was a full community event in Tolosa Park, a luncheon that members of the wider community loved to join in and celebrate all things Glenorchy. Upon the demise of those, the Claremont-Austin's Ferry Grantham Precinct introduced celebrations on the village green, which was lost when the precinct program was disbanded. The Citizen of the Year group took up the mantle of providing a luncheon or dinner to welcome the new Citizen and Young Citizen of the Year. The cost of the lunch for the new inductees was even paid for by donations from each of them. In recent years, some external donations have helped with that. The Citizens of the Year group, who have continued to meet regularly, felt a significant tradition has been lost in our community. There is something special about being announced in January. There's increased media coverage, or the ability to utilise the Australia Day ambassadors to value add to any community event, and a full year ahead for the Citizen Young Citizen to engage in council events. As an example, the latest citizen each year, whoever's been nominated, usually lays a wreath on behalf of the group on Anzac Day. Again, that's self-funded by the members. That won't happen in this particular year. I realise sometimes tradition and emotion can cloud a vision for change, but I think we may have got this one wrong. I can speak from my personal experience as the 2005 Citizen of the Year. I was also the very proud parent to the young citizen in that same year. The council-run luncheon that used to happen, at which the annual announcements were previously made, it was usually on the day before, so usually on the 25th, was cause for me and others to have a day of annual leave or flex time and enjoy the company of the treasures that are our valued citizens and young citizens. Each awardee is a significant volunteer within our community, and they continue that volunteering, providing valued impact right across our city. These reflections sit outside whatever date Australia Day may be celebrated in the future, but a self-funding lunch and returning the award announcements to January would not impact financially and has strong capacity to instil a rejuvenated engagement within our community.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Just for the minute taker, can you email a copy of your question through, please? And just to clarify, it was can council review the timing of the announcement of
And a review of the timing of the announcement of the Citizen and Young Citizen of the Year plus supporting categories be implemented with an intent to return them to January.
Take that one on notice, General Manager?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further questions without notice? Just write that down. Okay, moving on to item 17.1, notice of motion, Alderman Kendall, proposal to call elected members councillors. Alderman Kendall's motion is that in accordance with section 25 of the Local Government Act 1993, the elected members of the Glenorchy City Council choose to be known as councillors rather than aldermen. Alderman Kendall, would you like to move that motion? Yes. Moved. Alderman Kendall. Anyone to second? Alderman Quick. Alderman Kendall, over to you.
Okay, well, I think I've spelt out my my argument in the papers. So yeah, this motion is about us as a council moving from the, in my opinion, slightly old-fashioned and colonist term of alderman and moving towards the more inclusive and modern term of councillor. So I just did a little Google before starting this discussion, and I found out that Darwin City Council, which was the only other mainland city council that still used the term alderman, has in 2022 given up the term. So if we make this decision tonight, historic decision, we'll be the second to last in Australia. So there's a few still in Hobart City Council that refer to themselves as aldermen, but I know there's a few differences of opinion potentially in the room, so happy to open it up to other people's thoughts on this matter.
Thank you, Alderman Kendall. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I've served in local government for over 8 years as an alderman and Lord Mayor. And despite the so-called gendered titles, I was able to thrive because to me it's not about the title, but it's about what we do and the outcomes we achieve in these roles of privilege. Doctors were traditionally male, nurses were traditionally female. Nowadays the title distinguishes the role and not the gender. And so it is with Alderman and the 10 Lord Mayors of Hobart. It's not going to affect me, so I'll put this out there. It is not going to affect me one iota because I'll be Deputy Mayor, which is probably another sexist term, but because it was traditionally male. It just doesn't have the word man in it. So the use of Alderman distinguishes a city council member from their rural counterparts. Nothing more sinister than that. And as a hard-working and productive Lord Mayor, I worked effectively with my Green colleagues. In fact, I told Councillor Kendall that I was very proud of the outcomes we achieved for Hobart City Council working with the Greens. However, if Councillor Kendall, beg your pardon, first motion was to ban single-use plastics in this city or find ways to encourage better use of recycling, I would be the first to put my hand up to support her. However, proposing this motion, which in fact is possible anyway under local government regulations, that anyone can choose to call themselves either alderman or councillor, is a motion that's tied up officer time to research and give us qualified officer advice. And this is at a time when our city has faced some of the most awful significant financial challenges to meet its commitments to ratepayers. A huge disadvantage that we have in our community for our citizens, and we have a disengaged and seriously out of control youth behavioural problem. The council is caught up debating about what we're going to call ourselves, and I think that's unnecessary and has brought us some very negative public commentary. As for Councillor Kendall's reasoning, I have to say I'm also white, and I'm sorry, but I've got no control over that. I am cisgendered, and I don't need to apologise for that because I believe in gender equality. I'm not into shaming or male bashing. I note I am a woman and a human. Many would think me privileged. Again, I'm not inclined to apologise for that because I've always worked several jobs concurrently to get what I have. However, rather than any privileged guilt, I share my luck. I am generous to those less fortunate. I'm a fighter for just causes, and I have embraced humanity with all its glorious diversity and of multiculturalism and gender, binary or non-binary. In fact, in my traditionally male role as Speaker of the House of Assembly, I crossed the floor 27 times to allow transgender people the dignity to be able to alter their birth certificates. And despite the grief I suffered personally from the Liberal Party at that time, it is now accepted platform of that party. I also worked tirelessly behind the scenes to get women abortions in our public hospitals instead of being shipped off to Melbourne, because I used my position to lobby behind the scenes and get the government to change its position by threatening to join Councillor Jack Ewan to plant 30,000 paper uteruses on the public lawns of Parliament. I helped force the change because of my actions, not my title. As Lord Mayor, I ensured that every public loo in the city was overhauled and modernised and gave dignity to men and women. I didn't think dunnies were beneath a Lord Mayor. I've also marched to change the date many times to support First Nations people. And as Lord Mayor, I flew the biggest rainbow flag I could find off a council building directly in front of Premier Will Hodgman's window. And I know he felt the same as me, even though he might have been bound by the constraints of his party. So to call the title of Alderman an emotional and psychological barrier for young women, I do think is taking it a bit far. I'm happy to call Councillor Kendall, Councillor Kendall, if that helps her do her work without the burden of a title that doesn't resonate with her as she claims. But equally, I believe that if Alderman Dunsby, who has, I might point out, worked tirelessly for her community as an alderman, wishes to retain her title as alderman, I will honour her appropriately with that title. So I'm a bit disappointed this has been brought to council without an option, but as I said, really, it's a non-debate because we can already do it if we wish. And I think, you know, it's kind of dishonouring the many males and females who've worked effectively and without visible emotional baggage for over 7 decades in this council because of their title. So as per our statement of intent, I think taking it to workshop might have been more courteous, kind and caring, but it's out here now, so we may as well deal with it. However, I do believe ultimately this title will change, but at this time in history of this council, it is a frivolous use of resources given the multitude of pressing needs we have. It's certainly not the most important thing we should be discussing. The motion, I don't really think is a priority, progressive or proactive. It may qualify as modern, as Councillor Kendall claims. I'm a bit unhappy that it, you know, has been brought today. But I am thrilled there is, I believe, a genuine push for council reform by the state government and possibly overdue amalgamations. And it's almost certain our titles will be changed at some time in the future for consistency rather than by who is offended. So that's my views on the matter. It's about what we do, not what we call ourselves, and I really don't care.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussion? Alderman Dunsby.
Thank you. I thank Alderman Kendall for bringing the matter to council. Some of my thoughts of this have been already spoken to by the Deputy Mayor, but I'll just go through my notes anyway. So I think it's very important that we acknowledge that the forefathers of Glenorchy didn't take lightly the responsibility that they took on to place Glenorchy in the position to be proclaimed a city in 1964. The title of Alderman goes with the declaration of city status. As has been already mentioned, the term is also not linked by gender. In fact, many words used regularly in the English language contain the man, and they've been also mentioned by the Deputy Mayor. The whole word needs to be considered in its own context. All elected members who are sitting around this table today campaigned for the role of alderman. To make a change now will incur unnecessary costs at a time when we have matters of significantly greater importance. And again, has been alluded to, I do believe the current local government review will deal with this in due course, that we possibly don't need to be at this point particularly now. So for me, my thinking is status quo for Glenorchy. Let's get on with the job at hand. I don't believe the title is outdated. I believe it actually attracts the respect it deserves.
Thank you, Alderman Dunsby. Any further discussion? Alderman Quick.
I thank the Deputy Lord Mayor for giving us her political history. I support the mover of the motion, and in fact, from today onwards, I wish to be called a councillor, not an alderman, and I'm happy to have my sign replaced at my cost. I mean, it's ridiculous. The motto of Glenorchy is where things happen, and for Alderman Dunsby to say that something that happened in 1964 last century, we should be bound by that. represent a council and councillors is, to me, synonymous, rather than this antiquated title of alderman, which is non-existent in 98% of councils right across Australia. And the fact that, you know, cost is mentioned, I mean, for goodness sake, what cost? You know, has anyone told me, you know, can they tell me today, if we decide today in a vote that we are going to incur some costs, can someone quantify that? I don't think they can. And I'm sure if it does, if it is passed, all we're changing is this sign, the badges that we've got to enable us to get from one room to another. You know, it's Mickey Mouse. And I fully support the mover of the motion.
Thank you, Alderman Quick. Councillor Quick, any further discussion? No, Alderman Yaxley.
Sorry.
All right.
Thank you, Matt. Through you. Well, I don't have any offence or issue with the title of alderman, but you know, titles come and go, and you only have to think back to when you know, human resources was a name, and now you don't use human resources because the better name is people and culture. So there's sometimes better names for things as time goes by. Things can adapt over time and change. So for me, in my opinion, the Act is the answer. And so I think, given that the local government reforms are happening, and I think that eventually there will be a single name rather than this divide, for me, is it something that I think it's, in my opinion, let's wait until that happens, because I think I think the end result will happen like that. So to change it now, I just think in terms of the cost and the issue, the changes of things within the system already, I think that path is already coming. So for mine is that it's important to wait and to be smart with what we decide in this sort of thing. So that's my feeling. I don't either or. So if someone wants to be called councillor, I have no objection. If someone wants to be alderman, I have no objection. I just want to, you know, go back to the fact of the Act, and we can be called that already. So yeah, that's my feelings.
Thank you, Alderman Yaxley. Alderman King.
Thank you, Millicent. I've spent far too much time thinking about this. Far too much time. It's done my head in. In this particular case, anyone who wants to be called councillor can be called councillor. We have two councillors, and anyone else wants to be called councillor can be called councillor. It's already there. To me, it's a bit like weekly rubbish removal. And I'm not rubbishing your position. I'm just saying that a lot of people have campaigned over the years since I've been on this council for weekly rubbish, and it's always been there, but you just had to pay more. It's always been there. The same as being called councillor is there. So I don't see the need for this motion if it's there already. That's the thing that frustrates me. It's there, so be councillor and be happy, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. You know, my mind's spent too much time on this today, and it's done my head in. So.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Alderman Quick?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be farcical that if some of us decide to be called councillors, during the meeting you'll say Alderman King, Councillor Quick, Councillor Kendall, correct. Alderman Cockshut. I mean, what impression does that give to the greater public? They'll say, well, for goodness sake, what the heck's going on at Glenorchy City Council when, you know, 10 elected representatives are going to call themselves whatever they like? It'll, you know, I can imagine, you know, page 3 of the Mercury tomorrow, you know, reporting this as a follow-up to their item today. You know, we're going to be a laughing stock.
Thank you,
It's either one or the other.
Thank you, Alderman Quick. Alderman Cockshut.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everyone's comments in regards to issue and thanks for the motion, Councillor Kendall. I agree with Alderman Yaxley, or Councillor, which way we go, that it's going to be dealt with the Local Government Act and the review into that at the moment. And I will say we did have an election, we did campaign to be alderman, and it is a recognition as a historical term that we are a city council and we're known as aldermen, and it's not a gendered reference by no means. And I don't personally think where it says here is an emotional and psychological barrier. In my own personal opinion, I don't see it being there, but if it is for someone, that's their opinion. But I just think we've been elected as aldermen, but in the Act, it does literally say in, and I've just lost the point here, which I was going to say, 25.2, a person elected to a city council is a councillor, but may also be known as an alderman. So there is that option as well. So
Thank you, Alderman Cockshut. Any further discussion? Do you have a question? Because you will get the opportunity to close debate. So yes, you will have the opportunity.
Take your time.
I'll speak to the motion, and I do appreciate Alderman's contribution, and I appreciate that there are differing views around the table on this matter. I tend to share the views of the Deputy Mayor and Alderman Dunsby and Cockshut and Yaxley and King in relation to this motion. We are here to represent the community. We were elected by the people of Glenorchy as aldermen, and very recently as well, elected as aldermen to serve them, and to serve them by performing the role of aldermen that they elected us for. I have not heard in my time as an alderman over the last 5 years any feedback from any members of the community who suggest that we should be debating or considering changing our titles from alderman to councillor. It simply has not been raised as an issue of concern to the people of Glenorchy during my time on council. I appreciate the view that Alderman Kendall brings, that it could be a emotional and psychological barrier for those including but not limited to non-binary people and First Nations people. However, again, I haven't had anyone from those particular groups in our community raise that with me, and I haven't seen any evidence presented by Alderman Kendall to back up that assertion either. So I come back to, we're here to represent the community, and I couldn't, my hand on my heart, support this motion thinking that I'm truly representing the wishes of the community, particularly when we've seen today an outpouring of feedback to the contrary, that should not even be before us at council. We have much bigger issues to focus on than what our title actually is, and they want to see us getting on with the job rather than worrying about what we are called. As my fellow aldermen have alluded to, this is something that will be part of local government reform, I imagine, and through that local government reform, we could be called elected members. You know, we see in state parliament, they're called members of parliament. We don't know what that's going to be, so there could be another change, you know, if we were to make this decision this afternoon. I don't think that the term councillor is necessarily the best choice, because if you say you're a councillor, people think you provide psychological support to people. So it also has that dual meaning, although spelt differently if you verbalise it, and sometimes we do that in our role as alderman or councillor in the other context, but it can create that confusion as well. The term in the Macquarie Dictionary is defined as, in Australia and America, an alderman is an elected local government representative having powers varying according to locality. You know, the references to gender, as we've heard, we have the word man in human and in woman, mankind. We don't see a push to sort of move away from calling ourselves using those terms, and I think the same goes here. It's not something that needs to be politicised, and that's simply not the way we do things around here at Glenorchy City Council, as the Deputy Mayor said, and as we've discussed in our very first couple of induction sessions, the way we want to interact with each other is to bring things to workshop for discussion, and if we had have done that, I feel like we wouldn't have been potentially, although totally valid, that this option exists for any alderman at any time to bring a motion to council, and every alderman has the right to exercise that. Sometimes, and I think in this instance, it would have been the case that we would have agreed potentially that whoever wants to call themselves a councillor can, and we don't need to make a political fuss about it in the community and bring some of the negative commentary that we've seen as a result. So that's my feeling on it. I respect Alderman's choice that exists within the Local Government Act to choose the title of councillor if they wish, but I don't think it needs to be agreed as a motion here this afternoon. So that's my thoughts. Any further discussion?
May I just ask a question? So if we don't support the motion and we don't vote, it will likely lapse?
No, it will be, the motion will be lost, but Aldermen still have the opportunity.
Yes. No,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
No,
to
that's
call themselves councillor if they wish, yeah.
Because I don't necessarily want to vote it down, but I don't want to support it either.
That's
Well, the option will still exist,
Yeah.
is the thing. Otherwise, we're voting that we will all be called councillor.
Yes.
That's the motion, so.
So,
Any further
question, Mayor,
discussion?
if I may, if we vote no, we're just voting for the status quo as it stands.
Yes.
Which means anyone can be called councillor,
Yes,
which we were at before.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's fine. We're not forcing people to be called councillor.
Question, Alderman Quick, because you have already spoken twice to the motion,
All
so
right.
do you have a question?
So just a point of clarification, that if the motion is lost and I wish to be called a councillor, that's acceptable?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. Councillor Quick.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll go back to the mover, Alderman Kendall. Close debate.
Yeah, so just to clarify as well, that when I sneakily tried to send off my business cards with councillor written on it, I was told that I needed to bring it as a motion to council to change the term. But so I am happy to have brought a motion, and I think it's good that we're able to have this robust discussion. Hopefully it hasn't taken up too many of our vital resources as we've all focused a lot on. So I'm also really glad that it isn't a barrier and that hasn't been felt as a barrier to anyone on council, and especially to the older women on council. I didn't find it a barrier. Obviously, I was happy to be elected, and I ran as a potential alderman. But I'm also very privileged. I don't have other barriers that have stopped me, and I was in the position to be able to do that. So this motion was less about me and us here in the room, and more about the community that we represent. And I think it's easy when we're in a position of privilege to not be able to see the barriers that are there for others, because we're not being stopped by the barriers, which makes sense. So, I'm not a sort of shrinking wallflower. I wasn't intimidated by this giant term, alderman. But I'm thinking of the way that our community look up to the people that they have voted in, their elected representatives, and think, yeah, those people really, they speak my language, they represent me. And our community is beautifully diverse, it's multiculturally diverse, it's gender diverse, and we have a very large contingent of Aboriginal and First Nation people here. So it's about them, and when they look to their elected officers and think that term resonates with me, they represent me, and also maybe one day I might want to step up and do that. So it's removing that barrier, which to us is tiny, it's just a minimal expense, but to other people, so the cost is tiny, but the potential gains in terms of who we recruit into the council as a result of that, and how much we get community engagement and buy-in from our diverse community. So that's what it's about for me. But I'm happy to hear that is an option for us to use the term councillor. And my last point, just on the using up of resources, I absolutely acknowledge that there are huge issues that we're dealing with on council, big systemic issues, homelessness, cost of living, and also environmental, and that's my perspective. But I believe in us. I believe in our council. I think in this last 3 months we've shown great leadership, and I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, Like, I think we can keep our eye on that really long-term strategic vision and the really important things, and at the same time make these tiny little decisions, or decisions that are small for us, but that to others mean the world. So that's where I was coming from, and I'm happy that you've engaged the discussion tonight.
Thank you, Alderman Kendall. Do you have a question, Deputy Mayor? Because Alderman Kendall.
Can I have a
closed
point of
the
clarification? That's the question.
question? Yep.
Yes. I know Councillor Kendall reasonably well, and I know she would never wish to offend any of us. However, the point of my debate was that I am supporting transgender, Aboriginal, non-binary, whatever, and I have fought personally hard for it. So I take a little bit of offence at the suggestion that because I'm not called a councillor, I am not representative of the community. What I was trying to point out, regardless of title, it's your actions that make you the person, not a title. So if anyone thinks I'm not open to be approached about transgender in particular, or non-binary or Aboriginal or any other label that we put on people, then that's not fair.
So your point of clarification was just to,
Yeah, I'm not asking for an apology.
no,
I'm
no,
just-
to ask that Alderman Kendall acknowledge that
Yes,
that was your point you were making.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't about you at all, so.
No, and I don't take it personally, but in the broad swipe, that you feel more like you're more representative because you're called councillor, it doesn't make us less representative because we're not called councillor.
Yeah.
Some of us work very hard in that space.
Yes.
And we also have a transgender, proudly transgendered councillor in the Clarence Council, elected by the public. So things are changing.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Alderman Kendall, for closing debate. Given you have closed debate, I will put the motion to the vote that in accordance with Section 25 of the Local Government Act 1993, the elected members of the Glenorchy City Council choose to be known as councillors rather than aldermen. Please raise your hand if you are for. That's Alderman Kendall and Alderman.
No, councillor.
Yes, it worked.
And councillor will be quick. And against, it's Alderman Yaxley, Alderman Dunsby, Deputy Mayor Hickey, Mayor Thomas, Alderman King, Alderman Slade, and Alderman Cockshut. The motion is lost. Whew, thank you. Moving on to closed council. Move that we go to closed council. Alderman King, someone to second. Alderman Cockshut. Thank you to members of the public who have joined us in the public gallery this afternoon. It's lovely to see you back again, and we will see you hopefully at the end of February for our February meeting. Thank you, members of the public who have joined us online. We'll see you soon.
Yeah. Christmas cards changed.